Welcome back to Racing Rundown. Today we have a preview of the Grade 1 Preakness Stakes, the second jewel of the Triple Crown that's coming up this weekend. It's just me today. Eric will not be joining me for the preview portion of this. He does have picks that he will give toward the end of the video, but I'm going to be handling the preview myself today. And before we get into talking about the horses in the race and previewing the actual race, I do want to address for YouTube the positive test that did come back from the Kentucky Derby from Kentucky Derby winner Medina Spirit. We spent about 12 minutes discussing this over on our podcast. I don't want to reiterate everything that I said over on that platform. So if you're interested in getting our full thoughts on what I said and what Eric said about that positive test, then head over there to get it. But I did just want to address that it did happen, and should the positive test come back from the split sample, or should the split sample come back positive, I should say, then the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission said that they would take the horse down. That should be what happens, and it's unfortunate that this had to happen in the sport, that something like this did have to happen. So that's the thing that for me, I think that positive test comes back from the split sample, then Medina Spirit should come down. But until we get that, I'm not going to say anything further on here. Obviously, head over to the podcast side of things on Racing Rundown for my full thoughts and Eric's full thoughts as well. But we'll get into talking about the field right now. 10 horses. The other disappointing thing about this Preakness is it is a rather weak field. This is one of the weaker fields that we've had in the Preakness in the past several years. But we do have the Preakness, and that is the important thing. So, like I mentioned, we'll get into all the horses, and we'll start off with the number one horse, which is Ram for trainer D. Wayne Lucas. This horse is coming out of a win in an allowance at Churchill on Derby Day. That was the opening race of the card. The thing about Ram is he was not very consistent throughout the early part of his career. Took him 8 tries to break his maiden 7 times. He lost maiden special weights in only one of those races did he finish in the money in. So definitely not very consistent in the early part of his career. The positive thing you could say about him, he is coming into this race in the best form of his career. Consecutive wins, one of those being at the maiden claiming level, though. This horse is very similar to Wayne Lucas's 2019 Preakness entrant Market King. I think Ram is a little bit better than Market King, but arbitrarily better than him, and really not much to indicate that he's going to run a good race in the Preakness. The other thing about him is that there is practically no pace outside of the Baffert entry in this race, and Ram would need a very, very fast pace to be able to factor in this race. I don't think he's going to get that. If he does for some reason, then he's a possibility to run underneath as a long shot, but aside from that, I really don't see a reason why Ram could win this race. The number 2 horse is Keep Me in Mind, who actually ran a very strong race in the Kentucky Derby, all things considered. And, every single year we talk about horses that ran good races underneath in the Kentucky Derby, 6th, 7th, 8th place finishes that don't get talked about because they were races that or efforts that in normal races would not be considered high-level efforts in races. But he ran a very good 7th place finish in the Derby, considering that he was very wide throughout the race and had to, especially out the far turn, had to come from really, really far back, very wide in a race where Medina Spirit had everything his own way. So definitely was not going to work out to a positive thing for him with that, but he was able to salvage enough to be able to run 7th in the Kentucky Derby. I don't know whether or not that indicates that he's going to run a winning effort in the Preakness, or whether or not that effort was just a effort over a surface that he really likes, which is Churchill Downs. You look at his career overall, especially his first 2 starts this year, they were bad. The Rebel Stakes, I'm willing to forgive that one because he had missed some training going into the Rebel with the Southwest, having been post-Southwest Stakes, I should say, having been postponed in Arkansas due to weather, so he was a little bit affected by that. But at the same time, Bluegrass, he didn't really have too many excuses. There wasn't much of a pace there, but at the end of the day, I don't really think he's the most talented horse in the world, but he does run well at Churchill. That is where his one victory has come, and his other race that wasn't in the Kentucky Derby was a 2nd place finish in his first career effort. So, he's not a bad horse. I think, though, he has the same problem that Ram does. He's going to be coming from very far back. He's going to need a pace, and I don't think he's going to get that pace. The number 3 horse is the Kentucky Derby winner, at least for the moment, Medina Spirit. All the controversies following him into this race. Like I mentioned, I already addressed that. I'm not going to discuss that. Just going to talk about the efforts from Medina Spirit. And, you look at the Kentucky Derby, it went exactly how he would have wanted it to go for him to be able to win the race. Medina Spirit is a horse that, as we have seen in the races which he's won, he needs to lead in them. Bob Lewis had the lead throughout in that race. Medina Spirit does not let horses pass him in stretch runs in races, which is a very good thing. Or I should further specify, when he's on the lead in races in the stretch, horses do not run past him. You saw that in the Bob Lewis, and you saw that in the Kentucky Derby. Both of those races he won wire to wire after getting the lead in the early part of the race. Kentucky Derby grabbed the lead, was able to set a very, very easy trip. Johnny V down the backside kept slowing them down every quarter of a mile toward the end of the race. And, really the race was over in the first half mile of the race once he was able to get Medina Spirit into position, slow them down, and be able to be in front at the top of the stretch. Medina Spirit, very tough horse to pass in the stretch. I don't know how anyone is going to beat him here. He's got the perfect setup. No speed is inside of him. And there's really only two other horses that have the potential to be speed. One of them is his stablemate, and the other one is a horse who I'm not really even confident is going to want to be on the lead, Midnight Bourbon, who we'll talk about in a few minutes. So I think it sets up perfectly for Medina Spirit to win this race because, he doesn't let horses pass him, and there's not really too much speed in the race aside from him. And he can very easily sit the same trip he did in the Kentucky Derby. So if you're trying to get this race right, Medina Spirit is the obvious pick. I will not be picking Medina Spirit just because of the situation with the Kentucky Derby, and I don't want to have to root for Medina Spirit to win the Kentucky Derby just because I do think it is a problem for the sport if he does win the Preakness. But I think he is the most likely winner purely based on the setup of the race. Number 4 is Crowded Trade, one of Chad Brown's two horses in this race. Crowded Trade is getting a lot of attention in this race, and rightfully so. He's run 3 nice races in his career, a maiden-breaking effort, and then 2 in-the-money finishes in stakes races. He lost a very narrow nose bob to Weyburn in the Gotham, and then was 3rd in the Wood Memorial. Of all the favorites in that race, he ran the best race on a day where none of the favorites really fired in the Wood Memorial. So, it was a good race for him in the Wood and a good race for him in the Gotham. But there's a couple of things I question about him. Number 1, I don't know how far he wants to go. I tend to think he's probably going to be better in the one-turn area, but it's not impossible for him to be able to run decent in the Preakness. He ran pretty good in the Wood Memorial, all things considered. So, I'm not ruling out the possibility of him being able to get this kind of distance. But at the same time, I don't know that he's going to be able to pass Medina Spirit in this race. And I'm going to sound like a broken record because there's going to be 2 things I'm going to say about every single horse in this race. I don't know if they can pass Medina Spirit, or I don't know if they're going to get the pace to run into. So I don't see a way Crowded Trade is going to win the race. I know there are people out there who do. I'm not one of those people because I don't know who is going to be the horse that goes with Medina Spirit. And, when it gets time for the stretch run, Crowded Trade could come, but I don't know that Medina Spirit is going to let Crowded Trade by him. Number 5 is Midnight Bourbon, the horse who is right now 3rd choice on the morning line, and is going to get a lot of play going into the Preakness because he did run a very good race that after the Kentucky Derby no one really talked about, but with him being one of the few horses back in this race from the Kentucky Derby, only 3 horses making the trip from Churchill Downs, and he ran a very good 6th place finish in the Kentucky Derby, kind of the same case as the description would keep me in mind. And we talked about this in our post-Derby recap video. Eric was right on top of that this horse ran a very sneaky good race underneath in the Kentucky Derby, and I say sneaky good because no one talked about it initially after the race. And I think obviously now that he's in the race, everybody's noticing that. He also has Irad Ortiz aboard, and whenever you get Irad Ortiz aboard, for the most part, that's going to be a good thing for the horse. But, Midnight Bourbon, it's a question of, is he going to send? If he sends, I think it could be possible that he could win the race. But, if Irad wants to park him 3rd, sit behind Medina Spirit and Concert Tour, again, I don't know how he's going to pass Medina Spirit. He didn't run bad in the Louisiana Derby, and he didn't run bad in the Risen Star, but, both of those races he lost. He hasn't won a race since the Lecomte, and, he's a solid horse. I think he's a threat underneath. I mean, that kind of sounds disingenuous to say because the horse is 5-1, but he is probably going to run in the upper part of this race, but I don't know that he's going to be able to win because of the setup he's going to get. Number 6 is Rombauer, the winner of the El Camino Real Derby earlier in the year. Hasn't won since that race, and that's only his second win in his career. But he had a change of tactics in his last start in the Bluegrass Stakes, and I think that could be lead to some kind of positive thing for him. Now, that could have been in the Bluegrass because outside of essential quality and highly motivated, there was not really much speed at all there, and he was just kind of the closest of the horses that would be normally closers. You know, you look at all his other races, dead closer, El Camino Real Derby, American Pharoah, Breeders' Cup, maiden breaking effort. He's a horse that's coming from really far back. But, you know, I think if he sits that trip, he could be an interesting horse here, depending on the price. I like him coming into the Preakness. It's really contingent on the trip, but I think if he sits closer, which I think he has the potential to do, then he could be a horse that it could run a pretty good race and could possibly, depending on circumstances of the race, win it if things go right for him. Now we're going to move on to the number 7 horse, the Japanese horse, Francisco de Ina. And this horse is kind of the same case as Ram. I think him and Ram are going to be the two farthest back horses in the race. And at the end of the day, you know, this horse is a dead closer. He's going to need some kind of really, really fast pace in front of him. I don't think he's going to get it. And, you know, if they really burn it on the front end, which I highly doubt, seconding that once again, don't think it's going to happen, he could run okay on the board, but you know, I think it's going to be interesting to see. This probably, I think, would be more so Connection's not using this for the purpose of using the Preakness as a purpose to get a race under him, but I think it could work. He's going to the Belmont after this, so it could work as a getting a race under him before the Belmont Stakes. He could run better there. I don't think the Preakness is his race just because of the setup, though. And the number 8 horse in this race is Unbridled Honor, Todd Pletcher's entry in here. Unbridled Honor is a horse who's coming out of a pretty good run in the Lexington Stakes, but that was a race where there was a complete pace meltdown in there, and that's what he needs in this race. And he's another horse that's going to be coming from really far back. You got 3 horses in here that are really dead closers in here, and you know, depending on how Keep Me in Mind Rombauer's trips go, you could say 5 horses in here. 5 of the 10 horses, that's half the field that are horses that really want to be far back, and they're not going to have paces to run into. You know, I think that this horse could possibly pick something up toward the end, but again, in terms of winning the race, I don't know who is going to go with Medina Spirit. I'm saying the same thing, and I really apologize because I don't like how much I'm repeating myself, but that's just the way the race is shaping out. I do not see a way that someone beats Medina Spirit to the lead in this race, and if someone doesn't beat him to the lead, I don't know how Medina Spirit is going to get past in the stretch. And now moving on to the number 9 horse, the other Chad Brown entry in this race. This is risk-taking. He is coming out of a poor effort in the Wood Memorial, but I'm actually willing to forgive him the poor effort in the Wood Memorial, at least in terms of viewing him going forward. I don't think the Preakness is his race. I really don't think the Preakness is anyone's race outside of Medina Spirit. I'm very happy to be wrong in this situation, but setup of the race, don't think it's going to be there for any of these other horses. The other thing about risk-taking is I really don't like the lack of consistency. The Withers was good, the maiden breaking effort was good, but the first 2 starts of his career were not that good, and the Wood was a very disheartening race if you're someone who believes in risk-taking. So for that reason, I'm going to be against him here just because I can't find the consistency in his career. And the final horse that we're going to talk about is the number 10 horse, the Bob Baffert train. Bob Baffert's other entrant, Concert Tour, the winner of the Rebel Stakes earlier this year, and he's the other speed horse in the race. And realistically, if you're trying to beat Medina Spirit and you're okay with going with the other Baffert horse in the race, Concert Tour is your horse in the race. If you're not trying to make money or find value or just protest the race, Concert Tour is the horse to go against Medina Spirit with, because he has the outside post. If he breaks well and Mike Smith decides he wants the lead, then Concert Tour could sit the trip that I think Medina Spirit is going to sit. And realistically, I think Concert Tour and Medina Spirit are going to try to run 1-2 in this race. And I would not be shocked if Concert Tour is the one that wins the race, but I think it's going to be Medina Spirit. Medina Spirit is not going to be my pick in this race. Neither is Concert Tour, but that's how I think the race is going to shape out. So now with all 10 horses completed in the analysis, we are going to move on to the picks portion of this race. I did mention at the top of the show that Eric was not going to be here to do the preview with us, but he is joining me just to give picks out for this race. So I'll turn it over to him right now just to ask him who his picks are in this race, and then I will give my pick in this race.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty simple for me. I don't need to prolong what I imagine Jack has already touched on. If you listen to our podcast, we've already touched on in terms of all the controversy. Point is, on principle, I can't, I don't want to pick this race. I'm essentially protesting. That being said, I'd be happy to see quite a few of these horses win, as they do feel good stories. Chad Brown, of course, is one of the, is the best trainer in the game as things stand right now. I mean, he's got two nice horses. There's the Japanese horse. Absolutely crazy to see him win. He seems like a nice horse, but also just that would be an insane story. But for me, if I'm picking one feel-good story I'd like to see, I'd go with Ram for D-Wayne Lucas. Would love to see him back in the winner's circle. Ricardo Santana Jr., one of my favorite riders out there. Ram's a cool horse. He's coming off a win at Churchill. Who knows? He'll probably like the distance and all. It's not a logical pick, but this whole race is a mess, so why not a messy horse win it too?
And my pick for this race, as I alluded to earlier, I'm going to be going with Rombauer in here. Again, underneath, there's not really too much. You can probably scrape together an exacta or a trifecta with the two Baffert horses in there, probably with your favorite long shot. Like I mentioned, don't really see a way they get beat, but if you think you can beat them, there's some enticing horses in here that are going to be probably some pretty good prices because the money's going to flow into the Baffert horses. But that's it for this preview. We'll see you next time, and hopefully next Triple Crown race will be a lot better in terms of circumstances. So have a good one. We'll see you with some more previews in the coming days. We'll probably have a recap still for this race, even though I can probably tell you right now how the race is going to go. So we'll see you for that. Have a good one. If you haven't subscribed already, make sure you subscribe to Racing Rundown here on YouTube and also to our podcast. We'll see you next time.